11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time for 2 hours of live stream writing accountability, followed by the half-hour Maxish Share What You Did wrap-up chat. So the way this live stream works, in case you're new, is that for 2 hours, an hour and 45 minutes today, because, well, it's 9:15 now, so I'm late. I apologize. New schedule. In the works. It's... Anywho, the way this live stream usually works is 2 hours, today 1 hour 45 minutes, of getting writing done, where you keep this stream open in a separate window, separate tab as background noise, as though we were in a shared digital workspace. And you're working on your thing and I'm working on my thing. Now, the accountability practice on your end works that you are encouraged to log what it is you're working on and what it is you're getting done into the chat as you're getting it done. Not necessarily to like sit in the chat and chat. You can totally do that if you want to, and there are other people in the chat, of course, obviously. But primarily, that is your side of the accountability, is that you pop into the chat and you let me know what you're working on. For my side of the accountability, one, you get to see my face so long as I'm in my chair. And I'm not on a potty break or doing housework, which I'm actually going to be doing, like jumping back and forth between today. The housework and the writing, not the housework and potty breaks. That might happen too. But you're going to be able to see me in the chair, and you're going to be able to see me screen sharing as I get my work done. Now, as you can see, I am working in a tabbed window, which means I cannot see the chat during the live stream. And that is by design. I have OCD. If I can see the chat, even if nobody's in the chat, all I'm thinking about is being ready in case someone pops into the chat so I can react. And if I'm in that headspace, I'm not in the headspace to get writing done or to tidying up my live work environment so that it can better facilitate the writing that needs to happen. So I'm not going to be looking at the chat during the writing, but at 11 the wrap-up chat begins, and that's about a half-hour max-ish. There is wiggle room built into my schedule in case the conversation goes a little over, but for the most part, I wonder if I can... Sorry, I just got distracted by an idea of like tidying up the writing schedule to make sure that I have my butt in the chair on designated days that you guys can predict with. Yeah, so the wrap-up chat works where at the end of the morning writing, I pop into the chat to see your accountability, but also whether you were writing along or just watching along, not reading along, I screen share so that you know that I'm working, not necessarily so that you can read it. The screen isn't set up so you can read, it's set up so that it's most comfortable for me in terms of reading and writing the work. So if you're having trouble reading and that's really why you wanted to watch the stream, I apologize. It's not, the screen is set up for my OCD sensibilities. Unless I get a larger desktop, I'm not going to be able to like make things larger, and even then I don't know how fond of that I would be. So whether you are watching along or writing along, you are encouraged not only to let me know what it is you are doing in the chat or working on in the chat, but also you are encouraged to let me know any comments and any questions you have regarding your projects, my projects, and the creative process in general. And I will respond to each and every one of them during the wrap-up chat portion of the live stream. But that is not going to happen during the writing portion of the time, which now that I've gotten, that I'm finishing getting things squared away just in terms of just on my end, it's pretty much going to begin now. Let's hop to it. did a thing. And is there room for the thing? Maybe if I moved the lower board up. It's a little shorter than the red shell. So I'm gonna look right. I don't technically have any room for this whatsoever. What was your music? Making awkward furniture decisions for as long as she can remember. Move the desk over. Or texting your neighbor who also thinks it's cute and asking them if they want it, because more than anything, you should be realistic. You have other tasks. Let it mellow in the brain pan, and you can decide what to do with it in a little bit. That'll be okay. Alright. If you moved everything down, there. If you moved everything down, you can move that up and then have it there. Kill my long-suffering brain pan. What do we do? What we do is we clean up the stuff that doesn't need to be in the apartment because it's recycling or it belongs to somebody else and it's still in here from PVD Fest. Get all that stuff in a pile. Get everything clumped. It's gonna be clumped. Alright. Let's go through the housework list. Trash bag so that if anything fresh gets in there, it's not going to be there long. Perfect. cycle of life and all that, but fuck you guys. Get out of my kitchen. Look, I made apple cider vinegar and soap for you. Go drown. The fuck out of my face. do something I never do. I will listen to a podcast as I live stream. Will I do this? Or will I go back and actually finish? Do I have a blooper? I do. So, it's okay.
I'm Jessica Abel, and we're going Out on the Wire, the show about making stories, step by step. I've been making comics for 25 years. I'm probably best known for my graphic novel, La Perdida, and for my 2 textbooks about making comics, Drawing Words and Writing Pictures, and Mastering Comics. I'm currently working on a series called Trish Trash, Roller Girl of Mars. On Mars. For my new book, Out on the Wire, The Storytelling Secrets of the New Masters of Radio, which is available right now, by the way, I spent the last 3 years interviewing the best storytellers on the radio and learning how they craft their work. Because I wanted to know how they do what they do. And more than that, why. What drives them? A while ago, I was interviewing Ira Glass over Skype, and I asked him what motivates him to tell stories. And what he said surprised me.
I'm interested in making stuff that's amusing to me.
It surprised me because I was like, really? That's it? But then he kept going.
And I want it to be a thing where it pulls you in and you can't not listen to it. If you hear minute 1, you can't turn off and miss minute 2. That's what's so interesting to me. That's like going into a casino. That's like trying to sell a car. That's like trying to like ride a bucking bronco. I say as someone who would never do any of those things, except in the casino one. You have these people who are going to be your interviewees, and you want to turn them into this thing that's going to be a product, and you want it to be incredibly special and magnetic. That's the thing that seems so captivating. That's what I think about.
What's Ira saying? Yeah, you want to do stuff you'll enjoy doing for sure. But when Hour's like, I just want to do stuff that's amusing to me, it seems like he's saying he just wants to have fun when he works. But no, he goes on to make clear that making his stories as good as they are feels like walking a tightrope. It's risky, it's brave, because what he wants is to make the most gripping, compelling, take you by the throat and not let you go entertainment out of an actual person's story that's possible. He wants to take us by the ears, grab us, and not let us go. He wants to do stuff that makes him the king of radio, which is what we all want. Aim high, and the danger is you've got further to fall. But if you don't risk falling, you're sure to come up short. Way back in month 1 of the project, week 1 actually, I was interviewing Jay Allison, the producer of the Moth Radio Hour. The name of my book and of this show was inspired by something he said to me about the storytellers on the Moth, about what it takes to tell a great story.
They stand up there. If they don't get out on that wire, well out on the center of that wire, and it's bouncing, and if they're just walking across the floor, they won't listen.
People won't listen. Did you get it? Me, I want to grab you by the eyeballs. I want readers who are like, oh my god, I cannot put this down. This is amazing. But the only way I'll do that is if I get way out on that wire and it's bouncing. If I don't commit, why should my reader? And so here I am, way out on this wire with this show, which is a super new and super scary thing to try to do. Way back in December, I was sitting in my studio, hunched over my drawing table, thinking about my next step. How am I going to get out of... It's funny, I want to say rut. I'm a successful, accomplished cartoonist. It's not a rut. It's a life choice. In some ways, I've reached the logical end of the life goals I set for myself when I was 21 or whatever. I just couldn't imagine beyond getting to where I am now. And somehow I thought that when I got to where I am now, everything would be what I wanted it to be. And it's not. And I'm 44 years old. No, wait, I turned 45. I'm 45 years old. It's time to do something different. Well, this is different, all right. I'm playing the same game these masters are playing, but taking creative risks is what it's all about. The producers in Out on the Wire are not in radio or podcasting to chit-chat, to meet people, or to build their platform. They're trying to make the most powerful, compelling stories possible, bar none. I wanted to get the details. What gets them up in the morning? What are they thinking about? Because in some ways, I want to know what makes me get up in the morning. Why do I keep doing this stupid job? What keeps me in my studio for 3 years looking out the window at the river down there below, instead of sitting on the bank eating cheese and grapes? I admit, when I talk to others about telling stories, I'm always thinking about how it applies to me, to my own process. And I expect no less from you, my friends. You're thinking about how this relates to you, to your secret story ambitions, and that is a-okay. Think about yourself. Cool. This story needs to be told. Oh my god, I can't tell this story. Do you feel that way? You are among friends here. The show will often appear to be about making radio and podcasts, and sometimes it will sound like a show about making comics, but it's not. This is a show about storytelling. What's underneath all those stories? How do they function? How can we make better ones? Stories do not, and should not, all have the same structure, and some aspects of storytelling are medium specific, but there's a set of tools and techniques that will build and move stories that is universal. You may have no interest in making audio stories. That's okay. I am using these same principles to write my documentary comic, Out on the Wire, and to write my very fictional comic, Trish Trash, Roller Girl of Mars. Take me as proof that this stuff works. This is not a show about radio. Radio people do this stuff super awesome, and so we're going to talk to a bunch of them, but the show is about story. And my book is about story. It's right there in the title, Storytelling Secrets. researching my book, I recorded hours and hours of interviews with master storytellers. Interviews no one has ever heard until now. In fact, I made these tapes with the idea that no one but me would ever need to hear them, and sometimes that's evident in the audio quality. Lesson learned. You just never know when you're going to want to turn your research into a radio show, so learn how to record good tape, kids. I'll be bringing you lost treasures from my Out on the Wire interviews with people like Ira and Jay, as well as star producers from shows like Radiolab, Snap Judgment, Radio Diaries, and Planet Money. We'll hear what they have to teach us, and we'll learn how to build a narrative together. At the end of this episode, we'll be talking to new master of radio Stephanie Fu of This American Life to get her story on making stories. And we've got a narrative-making challenge that will put you on the road to making something great. But more on that later. Out on the Wire. It's about taking risks, putting it all on the line, opening yourself up to the world, telling your story. Come on, let's get out on that wire. This is episode 1, Eureka. Pay attention to what you pay attention to.
There are things that come down to technique, which is, how to make a structure and how to focus a story. But one of the things that doesn't get talked a lot about is so much of what makes something good is just your taste. Enforcing your taste and noticing what your taste is and noticing what you really love and what you only kind of like. To be successful, you have to have interesting taste.
When Ira first said this to me, you have to have good taste, I was like, taste? What? What is he talking about, taste? That sounds so weird and elitist. But I thought about it a lot, and this is what I think he means. Pay attention to your attention. Pay attention to what you feel connected to. That's your taste. When I first started writing this episode, I was in my studio with my producer, Ben, and he played me a piece of tape you heard earlier.
It's funny, I want to say but. Successful, accomplished version is just not a but. It's a life choice.
And he was like,
That is such a good piece of tape.
I'm like, okay, I can see that. He has a different ear from me. Taste is about what captivates you, which of course gets straight back to the idea that you should work to amuse yourself, like Ira said earlier. Amuse yourself and you'll realize you're following your taste. What will keep you going for however long it takes to get through it? I've got a funny story about how I managed to amuse myself. A few years ago, actually quite a few, it was in December 2006, I was working on my textbook about how to make comics, drawing words and writing pictures. I collaborated on it with Matt Madden, my husband and fellow cartoonist, and we were working on a chapter about how to create characters. There's an activity in there we'd done many times in our classes where you randomly choose a physical characteristic, a job, and an emotional characteristic, and you put them together, and you build a character out of it. It's really funny and fun, and it demonstrates definitively the power of juxtaposition. Just put those non-aligned things together, and your mind starts working. I can't tell you how many students have gotten bizarre combos like melancholy jockey who wears colored contacts, and then gone on to actually love those characters and use them in stories. Anyway, I had Matt give me those keywords for 2 characters so I could draw some illustrations for the book. Here are the prompts Matt gave me.
Cheerful, spiked collar, X Games, worrywart, wears a skirt, tour guide.
And I came up with a roller girl and a 7-legged Martian. The second part of the assignment is to put the characters together into a scenario and build a story structure. So I gamely put Trish Trash, my roller girl, on Mars and invented a wacky caper plot involving a stolen suitcase, and then drew another illustration to suggest that storyline. It was just an example for our textbook. I wasn't trying to come up with anything deep. But days later, I still felt myself drawn to the idea. And on Christmas Day, 2006, I jotted down a few notes. Roller derby is the biggest Earth sport. Mars is the farm league. It's not competitive. Bad roads, too many rocks, dust, wind. Martians use wheels. Very uncool. Alright, a farm machine breaks down and she gets this hollow image asking for help. And she has to find an old Martian. Yeah, okay, so she gathers a girl gang in high school and has like all these sidekicks, like old Wonder Woman from the 40s. That's just goofy. Clearly riffing on Star Wars and the silly illustration I'd done for the book. Immigration problems, all brown kids,
strife, maybe? Blonde Earth teams.
Which is where I start to feel the pull of my usual more serious concerns in fiction: class struggle, institutionalized racism, complicated personal relationships. About 20 minutes into making my first page of notes on this idea, and I was off. 6 months later, I had read up on leaf harvester ants, bee colonies, various theories about terraforming Mars, and I was halfway through Kim Stanley Robinson's Red Mars trilogy. I went to a bunch of derby bouts and talked to players. And as Bit stuck to it, my idea grew from a silly Nancy Drew on Mars romp to a massive, world-spanning story touching on climate change, class conflict, and coming of age. I built a world in my mind, and eventually, with the help of my assistant Lydia Roberts, I drew it. It's now almost 9 years later, and I'm finally close to finishing the book. Making this book has been an epic struggle, but it all stems from 3 prompts.
Cheerful, spiked collar, X Games.
And Trish isn't even really all that cheerful anymore. I paid attention to my attention, and I dove in, way in. 8 years and 2 planets in. And let me say again, this is my taste. Someone else would see roller derby and Mars and be like, whatever, and keep walking. I mean, that person would clearly be nuts, but hey, different strokes. Learn to pay attention to what you pay attention to. It's so easy to dismiss it. You have to train yourself to grab onto those things and not let go. There's a story in Out on the Wire about this same process on a topic that's much closer to real life. As far back as 2005, Alex Bloomberg became curious about how all his very non-rich radio producer pals were buying houses. How were they getting mortgages? What was going on in the housing market?
And I become sort of obsessed with all these websites that were talking about it. And I got into this sort of website called Calculated Risk. And early on in 2005, it's sort of a place for sort of skeptics about house building.
Alex worried that reading sites like Calculated Risk meant that he was just succumbing to alarmist internet rhetoric. He kept trying to pitch stories on the topic to This American Life, where he was a producer at the time, but nothing seemed to gel. He consulted his old friend Adam Davidson, who was a business reporter.
Yeah, you would tell me, like, people that I talk to say there's not really a problem as long as the models are right. And he was like, models could be wrong.
There was something about the subject that he couldn't let go of. And then, in the summer of 2007,
The first big subprime lender collapsed. It was called Century, I think. And then a bunch of them collapsed after that. And then I remember Alex sending me this news to the subprime story. And I was like, I think it's still okay.
the 2008 story they made to explain what had caused our economy to virtually collapse is called The Giant Pool of Money, and it's among the most listened to, talked about, important hours This American Life has ever made. And that episode, and the reaction to it, is what inspired Adam and Alex to found the show, Planet Money. What's important here is that the germ of the idea that eventually made Planet Money possible, this weird tingly feeling about mortgages, seemed like a total outlier when Alex started poking at it and developing it. And then it took 4 years to come to fruition. Sometimes that's just how it is. I know. My book La Perdida took 6 years. Another graphic novel, Life Sucks, also 6 years. A novel, which has never been published, 5 years. Drawing words and writing pictures, and the sequel Mastering Comics, 6 years. Out on the Wire, well, you could call it 3 years, or you could call it 16, if you count Radio and Illustrated Guide, the comic I did with Ira back in 1999. And the tales I could tell about how I struggled to make these works real. In fact, probably I will tell some of them, but it comes down to this. When I have a good idea, I grab on and I don't let go. I read and research, I write and I talk, and I keep building material until it clicks into place, like Alex did with the story that became The Giant Pool of Money. I also toss and cull and strike and annul. I have plenty of ideas that I don't like, but at the core, the ideas I chase are the ideas that I love. My works take years to come to fruition, and I need ideas that can fuel me for a long, long time. Like Ira says, your taste matters. And how do you know what your taste actually is? You have to listen to yourself, pay attention to what excites you, what you talk about, and then invest in it. invest your time and your attention.
And chances are, like, if you're somebody who wants to make stories, the reason why you want to make them is because you love stories and you probably do have interesting taste, and that's kind of what's getting you into the game.
Now, I'm telling you to trust your taste, but I know that that is a tough thing to do. It's really hard. You have to believe you have good ideas and that other people want to hear your ideas. You have to believe that, or you can't make anything. You do have something to share. You have a point of view that's worth having. That's what Ira is saying in that tape. If you want to do this, it's because you're good at having good taste, which does not make you good at making stories. Only actually making a bunch of stories can make you good at that. Ira is also famous for talking about that. When I type Ira Glass into Google, the second suggested phrase is Ira Glass The Gap, which means this lo-fi video on YouTube of Ira talking to current TV about storytelling gets more searches on Google than his actual show. Not more listens, mind you, let's be clear, but this idea has definitely hit a nerve.
All of us who do creative work, like, we get into it, and we get into it because we have good taste. And you get into this thing that I don't even know how to describe, but it's like there's a gap. That for the first couple of years that you're making stuff, what you're making isn't so good, okay? It's not that great. But your taste, the thing that got you into the game, your taste is still killer. And your taste is good enough that you can tell that what you're making is kind of a disappointment to you. You know what I mean? Like, you can tell that it's still sort of crappy. A lot of people never get past that phase. A lot of people at that point think quit. Most everybody I know who does interesting creative work, they went through a phase of years where they had really good taste, they could tell what they were making wasn't as good as they wanted it to be. They knew it felt short. But if you're just starting off and you're entering into that phase, you gotta know it's totally normal. And the most important possible thing you can do is do a lot of work. Do a huge volume of work. Put yourself on a deadline so that every week or every month you know you're going to finish one story. Because it's only by actually going through a volume of work that you're actually going to catch up and close that gap. And the work you're making will be as good as your ambitions. Like, I took longer to figure out how to do this than anybody I've ever met. It takes a while. It's going to take you a while. It's normal to take a while, and you just have to fight your way through that.
As soon as I decided to start this show with an episode on ideas, I knew I wanted to use the opportunity to circle back to Stephanie Fu, a radio wonderkind I first met while researching my book Out on the Wire at Snap Judgment in Oakland, California. Stephanie is one of the most engaged, ambitious, open-hearted producers I met, and she's also among the most productive. Stephanie is an ideas machine. She's crammed all 10,000 hours of deliberate practice of her craft into about 3 years. So I was not at all surprised when Ira snapped her up to work in This American Life last year. I asked Stephanie how she managed to find so many great stories.
Well, I think that just being super curious as a person has helped me have a bunch of ideas, because I just think everything is a story. You have to walk through the world assuming that you are surrounded by stories. And that is not the truth. And as I've come to become older, I've realized that fewer things are stories than I necessarily thought. But I think that it's a really valuable way to live, especially when you're first starting out, is to waltz through the world thinking literally everything is a story. Like this gargoyle on this building, what's behind that? This person at this cocktail party in the corner, what are they about? And so, especially when I first started out, I was just interviewing all of my friends, everyone I knew. I was lying about being a journalist and calling random people who I just thought were, I remember, like, I thought the I Can Has cheeseburger meme was just so ridiculous. I was like, I wonder how that guy came up with that. And so I just, like, called him. And
Wait, what do you mean you were pretending you were a journalist?
I mean, I was like, oh, I have a podcast that's legit, where I interview people about their life goals or dreams or whatever. I didn't. I did. I had a podcast called Get Me on This American Life, which wasn't really legitimate at all. But I lied and got myself press passes into lots of things.
I don't think that's lying. I think that's being, brave, being ambitious.
Yeah, sure. Also a little bit sneaky.
Yeah, well, maybe a little bit. Like, what level is your podcast at? I guess you didn't actually have to say that to anybody, right?
No. I kept that a secret. I kept it a secret that my listenership was all of 5. But what I like to tell young producers that are starting out is don't get mad, get tape. Um,
That's a good one.
the things that irritate you, the things that irk you, uh, the second you feel yourself getting irritated, like delve really deep into that and think, okay, why am I irritated right now? Do other people have the same experience that I do? Are other people as pissed as I am? I remember that I used to skateboard around a lot in San Francisco, and guys would always holler at me and be like, "Kickflip!" That was always the holler. "Kickflip!" So original. Or be like, "Is that your boyfriend's skateboard?" And I get so irritated. So I started carrying a recorder around, and like I would get hollered at every single time I skated. So I started recording all of these
Hollers.
the things these guys that were yelling at me. And then I started chasing down girls who I saw skating. I started noticing them, and I'd run after them screaming, getting them to stop, and I'd interview them about their experience. Yellow fever when I was dating, and I was encountering a lot of guys who dated exclusively Asian women, and I felt very threatened. I did a story on it. Vocal fry. People writing in, complaining about it. It was very upsetting, and so we did a story on it. Which is not to say write a rant and then read it into a microphone. It's about go out and find tape, explore why this phenomenon is happening, and find people who are going through the same thing, and find perspectives outside your own. You are a hunter for stories, and you have to get out in the wilderness with your bow and arrow and like crawl through the brush. You can't just like sit at home in front of the TV. Like when Snap didn't have any money, if I wanted to go report on a story somewhere, let's say Texas, for example, I couldn't bring back one story, and so I told them like, all right, you send me out, I'm gonna bring back 10. But here's the thing, I didn't go out and think, I'm gonna go out and I'm gonna talk to people in bars and that's how I'm gonna find my stories. Like, no, I planned ahead a lot. Weeks before I went on my trip, I would do a ton of research. I'd read all the local newspapers and I'd read them, not just the recent local news, I'd read them pretty far back. I'd email local bloggers and personalities to ask them if there were people, interesting people that I should know, that I should talk to. I'd call all of the comedy clubs, and I'd ask if anybody there specialized in long-form storytelling, and I'd go record like 4 improv performers backstage before their show and have each of them tell me a story. I'd call my friends and ask them if they have friends or friends of friends who live in the city, and I'd call these random people and I'd say, who's interesting in this city? And then, yeah, there were also elements of, I was driving in West Texas, and there was this sign that said taxidermy that was like hanging off of
Okay.
one chain, all broken, and there was like a ibex, like in a tub of its own blood. And so I was like, yep, I'm going there.
No, I was just confused because I couldn't see the baby at first. I was like, what is she? Oh, there's a baby
I
under
wonder
there.
if you had any
Like,
feelings
it
about
just
how
confused me for a
these
second.
kind of concepts of searching for ideas and following your taste and all that other stuff might apply
Whoa.
to a fiction writer. for
Brain
example,
fart where I
somebody
totally
who
got
wants
lost
to
in
write
my
a
own thoughts and wasn't listening
It's
to the
about
podcast.
go out and find tape, explore why this phenomenon is happening, and find people who are going through the same thing, and find perspectives outside your own. You are a hunter for stories, and you have to get out in the wilderness with your bow and arrow and like crawl through the brush. You can't just like sit at home in front of the TV. Like when Snap didn't have any money, if I wanted to go report on a story somewhere, let's say Texas, for example, I couldn't bring back one story, and so I told them like, all right, you send me out, I'm gonna bring back 10. But here's the thing, I didn't go out and and think, I'm gonna go out and I'm gonna talk to people in bars, and that's how I'm gonna find my stories. Like, no, I planned ahead a lot. Weeks before I went on my trip, I would do a ton of research. I'd read all the local newspapers, and I'd read them, not just the recent local news, I'd read them pretty far back. I'd email local bloggers and personalities to ask them if there were people, interesting people that I should know, that I should talk to. I'd call all of the comedy clubs, and I'd ask if anybody there specialized in long-form storytelling, and I'd go record like 4 improv performers backstage before their show and have each of them tell me a story. I'd call my friends and ask them if they have friends or friends who live in the city, and I'd call these random people and I'd say, who's interesting in this city? And then, yeah, there were also elements of, I was driving in West Texas, and there was this sign that said taxidermy that was like hanging off of one chain, all broken, and there was like a ibex, like in a tub of its own blood. And so I was like, yep, I'm going there. Pull over, go and talk to some people, see what's going on, I mean, yeah.
Okay, so I wondered if you had any feelings about how these kind of concepts of searching for ideas and following your taste and all that other stuff might apply, like to a fiction writer, for example, or somebody who wants to write a nonfiction book, or
Oh,
a
it's
filmmaker.
exactly the same. Totally. It's exactly the same. I do comics, or I did. I used to apply all the same things when I did sort of autobiographical comics. I used to do comics about dating and my friends, and if there were things that made me laugh, or if there were things that made me pissed off, I would examine them through comics. And again, I write a lot for myself. I don't necessarily publish any of it. I mean, sometimes, 3 years later, I'll be like, oh, this is actually what might be an interesting thing to explore more. But I constantly see beginnings of stories where I see stories on the news all the time where it's like, it's not really a story. Nobody's really interviewed, but it's like, Florida man does this. And I'm always like, oh my God, that would make the best writing prompt. Florida
Yeah.
man. And why would Florida man do that?
Well, and how about all those story ideas that you have, that you come up with, that then, they don't turn into something in real life, so you can't do a reported story about it.
Yeah, I mean, again,
But
it's
you,
like
you
fan
imagine
fiction,
it, right? Like, you imagine your way through it, and you're like, well, if it were this, that would be awesome.
I mean, yeah, I think that fiction is wishful thinking in every aspect of that. In terms of your own life, and other people's lives. Wishful thinking about, wouldn't it be interesting if? It's that question that I was, I think that asking that same question that I was asking earlier is great nonfiction, which is, why would somebody do something like this? You sit there and you think, and you just think, why would somebody do something like this? What would their motivation be? And then I think that's how you get into a character's head, and that's how you start building a character.
The key to writing fiction and screenplays in terms of character is conflict, just like it is with nonfiction. That you have to come up with what is the thing that's going to test that character, and how are you going to make evident what they're all about.
Yeah.
If you can't make it evident through action or the results of action, it's not believable.
Yeah, I'm lazy. That's why I do nonfiction. I like to other people to just live their lives
Excuse
for
me,
me.
as somebody who just got done with 3 years of working on a book of nonfiction, I would like to assure you there's nothing lazy about working on nonfiction.
That's true. That's true.
So how does it feel to be the grown-up woman now working at This American Life? And what do you want to say to the girl,
Oh my
the
God.
skateboarding girl who is pretending to be a journalist, who had a podcast called Get Me on This American Life?
I wouldn't talk to that girl because she always felt like it. She was excited. I would talk to the girl who was at Snap Judgment producing 5 stories in a week and feeling like her head was going to explode, and that she was crazy and not good at her job. And I would just say, you're in it. This is what it takes. This is what it takes to be good. And it's working. And you might not feel like it's working, because you might be buried in a million stories, and you might not be able to find your way out, and the bosses might all be arguing with you, and everybody at work might be an absolute chaotic mess. But that's what it takes. That's what everybody goes through to become good. Getting completely messy, feeling completely lost is absolutely necessary to finding your way out and becoming good.
The German Forest.
All right, so it's 11:01, so I should go ahead and wrap up the live stream, and then I'll go back to taking notes for myself. Bum, 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 bum. So, a little note to myself. All right. So, it is time for the brief summary of the wrap-up chat. Okay, so here's the wrap-up chat. It goes brief summary, response, and I have a little queued up message there in case I happen to miss people who DM me or chatted with me while I happened to not be looking at the chats. So, the way the wrap-up chat works, in case you're new, is that I'm going to give a brief summary of what all I got done with a little bit of the how, a little bit of the why. And while I'm doing that, if you were writing along, you are encouraged, if you didn't already, to pop into the chat what it is you were working on and what it is that you got done with a little bit of the how, a little bit of the why. And whether you were writing along with me this morning or just watching along, you are encouraged to put in any comments and any questions you have about your creative work, my creative work, and the creative process in general. And everything that we discuss, I'm going to log here. And then I'm going to transfer over to this little spreadsheet where I actually track potential discussion topics for a podcast currently in development. I was listening to a podcast about storytelling and a little bit about podcasting more specifically, as part of my preparation. But I'll get to that in a little bit in terms of the how and the why. So, brief summary time while you pop into the chat, whatever you're going to pop into the chat, and I will pop in myself after I finish the brief summary. So first up today, I rotated the journaling prompts in the Golden Goose Eggs Facebook group like I do every 4-ish days, so that there's always 4 weeks of journaling prompts scheduled and ready to go. So I did that. Today's topic, the one that posted, was intuitive logic, and so 4 weeks from today, another one about intuitive logic will be available. Then I queued up my next buffer postings. As you can see from the numbers at the bottom of the video, it says 2.071/72/73. That means that this video is to encompass days 71 to 73 of the pre-scheduled 100 days of morning writing, which have, of course, been disrupted by the schedule of my new job, which I'm still working. I had a plan on how that was going to affect my schedule, and then that changed because of the way the work schedule, it is actually affecting my energy levels on different days than I was anticipating. So it is going to, my tentative schedule is going to need more shifting around in order to make sure that everything is squared away and I can get things done and get things out to you guys. So, I was making up 3 days today. That's what those numbers below before. The 2 before the decimal point means that this was the second round of 100 days of morning writing. And, so we're almost 3/4 of the way through of this 100 days of morning writing. Round 3, I'm only going to number the days of the 100 mornings when I'm here. It's not as much going to be 100 calendar days as it has been this time and the last time around. Next time it'll be the 100 actual days that I show up. And I'll have a better schedule in place hopefully by then. So I've got 25 days-ish, a little more than 25 days, so a little more than 3 weeks to just under 4 weeks really to get that squared away. And I can do that. I can get that squared away. So the buffer postings that I ended up queuing up today are for my 3 Inkshares in progress projects: Weird Tales, which are fairy tales that do not look like fairy tales; Wonder Tales, which are fairy tales without the lame-isms or outdated societal constructs; and Seconds, which is an epic collection of poetry. Specifically, it is a timed horological epic, which is a type of epic poetry that I invented, the horological epic. And the timed one is how I'm working, so the end lines of each poem match up with the various crossings of the hands of the clock over the course of a 12-hour period, which is why it's also 11 volumes rather than 12 volumes, or even 24 volumes, or 36, or, you know, not 24, 7, 14 or 21 volumes like you would see in a maritime horological epic, which I haven't decided what I'm going to write for a maritime horological epic, but because I've thought it up, I kind of have to now. That's just how projects work for me. There are some things that I think about, and it's like, I'm just going to let this idea out into the world, and other people can work on it. And there are other ideas that I think about them. It's like, well, now I have to prove that this is a thing that should be done by doing it myself. Like the Star Trek sonnets, and the Golden Goose Eggs, and Seconds. Anywho, that's what I got up on Buffer to queue out for the next 10 days. Then, because this is a live work studio, and so I have, part of making sure that I get writing done is making sure that my environment is conducive to the writing process. I did some housework. First, I took out the trash and the recycling, which I only do on Tuesday or Thursday mornings. And only if I have, well, usually in the past, if I have 4 bags to take down, which is mostly in reference to recycling than it is garbage, but I'm having to switch to a system of using smaller bags for garbage, like really CVS bags, because it's warm out, which means bugs are out, which means that when I buy fresh produce to make sure I eat healthy, I'm basically bringing fruit flies into the apartment, and I need to be better about killing them. So I have like my fruit fly trap did around the dishes to help reduce the number of fruit flies around in the sink itself. And my trash bag is currently a tiny CVS bag over top of a waste basket that actually needs to itself get thrown out. And I'm going to have to replace that with one of those covered trash containers that will help hide the scent of food and hide access to food from bugs that get into the house. That way, whatchamacallit, yeah, just so they don't proliferate, because the fruit flies have, over the last few days that I had errands out of the house and wasn't able to do morning writing and live stream cleaning the kitchen because I wasn't home even to clean, they got out of hand because their whole reproduction thing is very, very fast. It takes about 8 days for their eggs to hatch and turn into flies. And so it times up really perfectly with the last time I went and got groceries. And they've just proliferated very, like, the layers of proliferation. So, got the trap going. Gonna have it going for a while. Anywho. But I put a dent in what they have access to that they want by taking out the trash and switching to the small bag system today. Then I did a round of dishes, like I said, to reduce fruit flies who are bugging me. They keep coming into view even over here, so far away from the sink. Keep coming over here while I'm writing. There's one. Well, there was one on the lamp just now. Ha ha! Bastards. Then because I realized that I'm probably going to need a new waste basket in the kitchen area, updated my little to-buy list, and created a buy later list so that I can stop buying things I don't need, which with the new job is something I am at risk at as a recovering hoarder. And then I worked on podcast planning. Now, usually during the morning writing, I don't listen to music or anything online because I don't know what everybody's musical tastes are. And 2, and everybody might want to listen to their own music on their own ends of things. And 2, copyright infringement type things. Now, I did listen to a podcast today And I feel more comfortable with that because it has more of that conversational feel that you don't usually get from my morning writings, because when I live stream, I don't talk directly to the people in chat until the wrap up chat, and even then not until after the brief summary is done. And I'm going to be working on my podcast. I'm working on creating my own podcast, and in listening to podcasts myself in the morning, I came across information about this podcast, Out on the Wire, which was a very short-lived podcast a couple of years ago, being available for free on iTunes. And, you know, because it is rightly available on iTunes, and I'm not listening to, well, today I wasn't listening to a whole episode, I figured I'd go ahead and just continue streaming while listening to it, because I've already downloaded and saved all the episodes, and also, in a way, because it's just freely available online, you're not going to get the best quality from listening to me listen to it because of the way the sound is set up on my computer. And also, and also, you know, you'll get enough information about the podcast from the fact that you can see the logo as I'm screen sharing, you can see the title of it as I'm screen sharing, and you can hear a little bit of it and figure out if maybe you'd be interested in listening to it. It is predominantly about storytelling. It is a little bit about podcasting and, well, about audio storytelling in particular, because most of the people she's interviewing are people in radio. So it's about storytelling in general, because she spends her time interviewing a lot of people who are involved in radio. Even with the woman she was talking to when I paused the first episode, that woman, you know, has her own podcast experience and her own radio experience and her own comic graphic storytelling experience. But there is that strong kind of bent of radio being mixed into the discussions of storytelling. And the inadvertent lessons, like she mentions in the first episode, that a lot of these interviews she recorded as research for her book. She recorded them for herself and only later decided, you know what, I could make these into this podcast that would basically introduce or accompany the book. And so it's like lesson learned that even when you're doing research, even when you're interviewing someone just to have the information for yourself, make it a quality recording, because you never know what other uses you may end up having for it. And so doing something also that makes your research visually appealing. It occurred to me recently, before listening to the episode, that the inadvertent visual of how I write my notes, which is, you know, standard notation, but I mix writing forwards in print with writing backwards in cursive. And just thinking to myself that maybe I make that, this is going to end up in a different section, isn't it? Yes. And making this part of what I do, like making this something that I share as part of the rewards on my Patreon, which I'm also going to be working on updating in conjunction with getting the podcast ready to go. And just having these sort of visual preliminary notes that I share in the Patreon group as a way of teasing people. But it's like you still have to have the decoder ring, which really just means, you know, have the capability on your computer to flip around the message to try to read my backwards cursive, or if you have it on a phone or tablet, turning it around so that, not turning it around, well, yeah, you know, setting it up in such a way that, you know, you can flip around the cursive, because as it is, the note-taking apps, not a one has the capability of automatically flipping the handwriting over. But I think that adds to the appeal, in my opinion, because then you know it's a Rosie note, because it was written backwards in cursive. But like I said, I mix that with writing forwards in print, because I don't automatically read things backwards. This is not a form of dyslexia. This is a form of hypergraphia, which is like just this impulse to be continuously writing, and usually as part of feeding that impulse, in order to take off some of the tension of the writing itself, the brain comes up with interesting ways of writing and of shaping the writing, and even requiring special different colored writing utensils to satisfy the urge to write as much as possible. So it's not just about writing, but it's about making the writing process as interesting itself in those little details as possible, as a way of helping to rein in the amount of writing itself. So hypergraphia, which, you know, usually comes paired with lots. It's not usually a condition that sits on its own. It is itself like a collection of 5 possible different symptoms that are themselves conditions and are themselves tendencies on the OCD spectrum. So it's possible that hypergraphia is related to OCD, and maybe even on the OCD spectrum itself, though I've not yet seen literature that connects them that directly. It's more just, here's hypergraphia, here's what makes hypergraphia, here's OCD, and here's all these different things that could possibly make your OCD, and oh look, it intersects with hypergraphia. So hypergraphia could possibly just be something that sits on the spectrum or remain something separate. But like OCD, it intersects with many, many other mental health conditions, which is fascinating to me, and something that will get discussed on the podcast at some point. In fact, let me write down hypergraphia and OCD as a topic that we covered today, because I brought it up, and I also brought up environment planning for creativity. So now that I have finished the brief summary, it is time for me to pop into the chat and respond to all comments and all questions regarding your projects, my projects, and the creative process in general. And if you happen to be writing along, and share details of that in the chat to hold you accountable, just like I've held myself accountable by delivering the brief summary and being on the camera in general. So here on YouTube, we do not have anyone in the chat. It's pretty standard. Most of the chatting happens here on Twitch, where Artie Safari says, hey. Hey, Artie Safari, it is nice to see you. I know I've seen you around here before. I know I've seen your name. So I'm going to assume that it was just wanting to say hey, and just wanting to hear what all I rambled about today, which was mostly fruit flies. And hypergraphia. Hypergraphia is much more fun to talk about than fruit flies. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap up, because with all my ramblings, you had plenty of time to put things in the chat. Thank you very much for joining me today. I'm Roaster Music, your live stream writing accountability partner here. I'll have a more set schedule for you soon, but when I am here, it's from 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time to 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time for 2 hours of live stream writing accountability, followed by our half-hour Max to Share What You Did wrap-up chat, where we talk about your creative projects, my creative projects, and the creative process in general. Because the more we can talk about what it is we're working on and how it is we're working on it, the more we can iterate on that what and iterate on the how, and just improve all the stories we tell, whether it's the stories we tell ourselves, the stories we're telling each other, or the stories we're telling together as a collective, family, society. And maybe, just maybe, little by little, we can build a better world through better storytelling. Thank you very much for joining me today, and I will see you next time. Good journey, my friends.